a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
We're already Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Former President Trump capturing a majority of the vote in a straw poll for the 2024 GOP nomination at CPAC in Dallas Saturday. Fox's Jeff Paul in Dallas has the details.
When attendees were asked about who they prefer, 69% of them went with the former president, compared to roughly 24% who prefer Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, we should note when they removed Trump from the equation, DeSantis was the clear winner. So no major surprises, especially when you look at what happened at the last CPAC back in February in Florida. Very similar results. Now, attendees we spoke with say they aren't surprised by the results of the straw poll, and either is former President Trump, as he mulls running possibly again in 2024.
Iran is eyeing a revival of the 2015 nuclear deal.
Saying that nuclear weapons have no place in Tehran's doctrine, Iran's foreign minister Sunday called for a revival of the 2015 nuclear deal with the world's powers, including the U.S., but stresses Hossein Amir Abdollahian, success all depends on flexibility on behalf of Washington. He's also calling on the UN's nuclear watchdog to technically resolve any remaining issues regarding Iran's program and to distance itself from non-constructive political issues. Direct talks between the U.S. and Iran aimed at reviving the Obama-era deal resumed in Vienna this past Thursday. Karen McHugh, Fox News.
Sunday was Purple Heart Day. Marine Corps Sergeant Kenny Kalish on Fox News Live discussing what receiving the Purple Heart has meant to him. Kalish was injured in Afghanistan in 2011.
When I first got injured and I was awarded my Purple Heart, I kind of looked down on it. That's changed over time, and as I've learned the history of the Purple Heart, I've just kind of really accepted it and just taken it in and like, you know what, hey, I earned what I did.
I'm Laura Cantor, and this is Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktat, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I've got an effort that I'm going to start today dealing with the Second Amendment and the Bruin decision. You'll recall that my favorite Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Justice Thomas, wrote a decision filling in the other gap left open by Justice Scalia when he said, yeah, you got a right to keep arms, but he never talked about bearing arms. Well, this is Bruin. Since Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas made crystal clear in his ruling in New York Pistol and Rifle versus Bruin that the Second Amendment is not a second-class civil right, the question becomes, how far does this decision go? After consulting several gun and constitutional lawyers, here's the short answer: very far. Thomas stated unequivocally that Americans' right to carry a gun outside the home has been treated as a second-class right in modern times. Indeed, the whims of politicians have been treated with more respect than bedrock constitutional principles surrounding Americans' right to defend themselves with guns. Thomas wrote, "We know of no other constitutional right that an individual may exercise only after having demonstrated to government officers some special needs." The decision, the New York Rifle and Pistol Association, didn't touch on the issues of licensing, background checks, training requirements, or limiting who may have a gun permit in the case of felons and the mentally incapable. Since the decision came out on June 23rd, I've sought the answer to the question I posed above. I've spoken to gun law experts around the country and sought to put things in perspective. More questions arise. Does the decision affecting guns in, quote, common use also apply to bans on certain guns, such as AR-15s? And of course, anytime you're talking about guns, you have to use the phrase assault rifle. Otherwise, the left is not going to pay any attention to you at all.
Is there any other kind?
No, there are just different kinds of assault rifles, even these little pistols that people carry. What about parts you put on a gun? Silencers, scopes, hand grips, etc. Various states around the country limit gun accoutrements, such as ammunition, so-called precursor gun parts, magazine sizes, ammo size, stocks, sights, changeable lowers, and other parts. 4 states require that special permits be obtained before being able to buy ammo. And there are several different kinds of permits for various bullet sizes. Clearly, these are attempts to create a barrier to defending yourself. Now, we should get the folks who help with Planned Parenthood versus Casey to start talking about undue burdens, right? That's where that phrase came from. Chuck Michel of the California Rifle and Pistol Association notified all 58 county sheriffs that the Bruin decision changed the state's may issue or good cause to acquire concealed gun permits. Concealed CRPA is already litigating California's magazine limitation and assault weapons bans, as well as bans on certain semi-automatic weapons, age limitations on purchase of semi-automatic guns, and so-called large capacity ammo magazines. So, when the Supreme Court, as it did in Dodds, if instead of narrow deciding the case on the narrowest grounds before it, if the Supreme Court decides in a broad decision, thereby eliminating a lot of questions after the decision, it's criticized. Supreme Court here is going to be criticized for the way Bruin came down, because all of these questions that I just read will be percolating through the courts for years. And the critics will say if the Supreme Court had just gone a little farther, we wouldn't be having this problem. Constitutional law attorney Mike Davis, head of the Article 3 project, told an outfit called the Adult in the Room podcast that from now on, these kinds of limitations on guns will be required to be measured by strict scrutiny. You've heard me talk about strict scrutiny before. Strict scrutiny is the highest level. Rational state purpose is the lowest level of scrutiny that the court will use when examining due process and equal protection questions. Now, the state has a heavy burden now of determining where a felon, untrustworthy, that we have a dangerous mental illness that puts the community in danger. He said, governments can regulate guns just like they can regulate speech, but it's going to be with a more exacting standard, strict scrutiny. And he said, so are the laws about magazine sizes, semi-automatic limits, and bans. William Kirk of Washington Gun Law said on the Adult in the Room podcast, Justice Thomas' opinion makes it clear there can be no debate about this, that when we're talking about these sorts of restrictive gun measures, the only analysis to use is strict scrutiny. And if that is the standard moving forward, if all the federal courts follow this very clear direction from the Supreme Court, then I don't see how magazine bans survive. I don't see how AR bans survive. I don't see how many of these restrictive gun measures around the country survive. I don't see how they're going to survive constitutional scrutiny. Pennsylvania gun attorney Dylan Harris of the Firearms Industry Consulting Group, a division of the civil rights defense firm, indicated that all the gun grabbing laws are in the crosshairs. He told the Adult in the Room podcast that previously the test to determine whether a gun law was constitutional was done under an intermediate scrutiny threshold, which is a much easier test to measure government rules and then government scrutiny. Referring to two previous gun cases, Justice Thomas wrote that, quote, since Heller and McDonald, the courts of appeals have developed a two-step framework for analyzing Second Amendment challenges that combines history with means-end scrutiny. The court rejects that two-part approach as having one step too many. Step one is broadly consistent with Heller, which demands a test rooted in the Second Amendment's text as informed by history. But Heller and McDonald do not support a second test that applies means-end scrutiny in the Second Amendment context. So this is all kind of thick lawyer talk, etc. But I have our local gun law here, which is very restrictive. It's a Public Law 20-223. And I won't do it all today, but I'll go through it section by section and tell you what it says. All you challenging politicians out here, here's an issue for you that's going to appeal to one part of the public, reforming our gun laws before the courts do it for us. So we start out with Section 3 of the bill, and it adds a new item H to Section 60100 of Title 10 to read, putative owner means a person, were it not for the requirements of this chapter, would be the owner of a firearm or who acquires possession of firearm or one who acquires possession of a firearm by theft. That is a putative owner. So when you read those words, you can see somewhere down the line they're going to sock it to every putative owner. Somebody who didn't go through the procedures but got the gun somehow, maybe by theft, maybe he just bought it, whatever. And then we've got I. Lawful owner means a person whose right to a firearm has been perfected in accordance with Section 60103 of this title. And then we go to Section 5 of the Act, and it says that a gun shop owner must deliver a written warning to a purchaser or transferee of a firearm, written warning which states in block letters not less than a 1/4 inch in height the following text. It is unlawful and punishable by imprisonment and a fine for any adult to store or leave a firearm without placing it in a secure locked cabinet or closet or without a trigger law in place. Did you get that? Now, if you have a pistol and you keep it in your bedside table, you pull open the drawer and pop the pistol in there, that is punishable by imprisonment and a fine. Because if you got a gun at home, it's got to be in a secure lock cabinet or it has to have a trigger lock on it. Section 6 adds a new Section 7. Conspicuously post at each purchase counter the following warning in block letters, not less than 1 inch in height. And it's the same thing. I'll go to one more section and then we'll let it go until tomorrow. Section 8. Any person, legal or natural. A legal person would be a corporation, a limited liability company, etc. Any person, legal or natural, who transfers, gives, returns, sells, or loans any firearm to any minor is guilty of a felony, which shall be punishable by a term of imprisonment not less than 5 years and a fine of not less than $5,000. In the case of a violation by a legal person or persons performing the forbidden acts or omitting the required acts, and any responsible officer who knew or should have known of the fact of the act as omission committed shall be liable for punishment under this section. So if you're an officer in a corporation, you got a heavy burden there. Now, there is an exception. This section does not apply when a minor is being instructed by his parent or guardian in the use of weapons, or when that minor, properly licensed, is hunting with his parent or guardian who is properly licensed and complying with the provisions of Department of Agriculture hunting regulations, and there's a number. So if you give, sell, lend, whatever, a minor to a firearm, it could cost you $5,000 and a felony conviction. So I'm saying we have an extremely tough gun law here on our island. I'll come back to this. I'll work through this a little bit at a time. So much for the Second Amendment. Jose, I'm still looking for the mystery man. The man in this picture who's between Josh and Nancy in the background. I think you can pop that up on the screen, can't you? Yeah, out there, Tall Tales detectives, please help me find this guy. He's got the shaved head. He's beside Josh. He's beside Nancy, and he's standing behind them. And I really got to know who this guy is and what is he a high muckety muck? Airport security, Department of State? What's he doing in this picture? Tall Tales detectives, please work on this for me. Okay, next we go to Jemmy Ikutny. Yeah, here we go. Our view. Schools are back in session. Activity is increasing. Be alert. There's nothing here. It's just,
you never heard that one, Bob. Be alert.
Be alert.
The world needs more alerts.
Exactly. Yeah, so school's back in session. Be careful when you're passing a school bus with his flashing lights on. cannot be passed. Doesn't matter how wide the road is, where the kids are. You see those flashing lights, stop and wait until the lights turn off. Be careful driving around schools. Look out for children. Boy, I could go, if I got tired of doing this, I could get a job writing editorials for the Daily News.
Eat your veggies.
Yeah. Yeah, like spinach is good. It makes you strong, right? Okay, let's see. Next on the card. And next is the card. Yeah, so the card for today, I've got a lot of stuff on the card. And here it is. I've got John Fernandez versus every child. I've got Dennis. You notice I didn't say Dennis the Menace, although the temptation is great. I've got Dennis versus MSN, Michael San Nicolas. I've got Tall Tales versus the Lieutenant Governor and Roy Gamboa. I kind of tipped my hat to this one on Friday. I've got the Pacific Island Times versus the Earned Income Tax Credit. If you're going to write about something, know what you're writing about. Even if you're the Pacific Island Times, even if you hire one of the best columnists on the island, you got to know what you're writing about. I've got the CNMI versus Keneal Weird. Fine, this is the second time now. The real truth about the Insular cases has run in the paper instead of the narrative. But even then, Steve Limtiaco had to go with the narrative, the racist narrative, right? People want to see it overruled because of the racism. Then I've got Judy Wampet versus the majority. I've got DeSantis versus abortion. DeSantis versus mind virus. And I'm a little bit at sea with myself concerning DeSantis. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I'm going to get into it again on this abortion angle. I don't like to see public officials using the government's back scratcher to scratch their own back, like Jane Flores. Jane Flores never does anything, to help women. The only thing she ever wants to do anything about is talking about killing babies. Classic case of using the government's back scratcher to scratch your own back. Last item the penultimate item on the card is gaslighting versus orange rice. And I kept Vanessa versus the Blacklist Dozen and Frank Uggan on the card because I may want to talk a little bit more about that, if for no other reason than to mention today that we somehow got through an entire weekend without Vanessa doing something incredibly stupid. So in this case, for a change, it's not what Vanessa did, it's what Vanessa didn't do. Yeah. Okay, so we got Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. That gets into that item I've got about gaslighting later on. We'll talk about gaslighting and orange. Let's see, that's on the card somewhere too, isn't it? That's yeah, gaslighting versus orange rice. Okay, so that's Paul. And then I take a look at, I went through all of the ads. Nobody screwed up their meeting ads, the notices of their meeting, because there weren't any in the paper. But once again, I really banged Therese Terlahi last Friday. And for the most part, I like Therese Terlahi. I think she does a pretty good job. I think we're well served by her. But when she came out with this whopper that she's against part-time legislature, if you don't want a part-time legislature, why not just tell the truth? If I didn't get paid for doing it, either one, I couldn't do it, or two, I don't want to do it, because that's the main reason all the way around. Therese comes out and says, we've got to have a full-time legislature to act as checks and balances on the executive and the judiciary.
Nope.
this legislature that she's the speaker of, the 36th, is the most untake charge legislature I've ever seen. Therese, the governor is doing something really outrageous. What do you think the legislature is going to do? Play possum? Can we play possum? Which means roll over and play dead? Maybe we'll present some resolution. No, we can't do that. This legislature has given everybody except Jim Moylan, who has his own style of writing letters. Everybody but Jim Moylan sent a letter that's read like this, at least the Democrats. Dear Governor, we know that some of the things that you are doing are somewhat controversial. I want you to notice that the rest of this letter is blank. It is just a white sheet. You may interpret it as carte blanche. You could do whatever you want to do. Yeah, and then Therese, they can't even get their stuff together on the mechanics of being a legislature. I think if we had some part-timers in there, people who knew how to do things and get things done instead of sitting around and jabbering, they would at least get this whole agenda process down right. Because we're going to start the budget tomorrow, and here's how the agenda for the legislature reads for tomorrow. Potential items for agenda. Bill 276, which is the budget. So if you read this, it's supposed to put you on notice of what they're doing. They may or may not discuss the budget. And if they don't, there's nothing else on their agenda except the Guam hymn, the national anthem, the Anafresi, God knows what else. So don't give me that gaslighting about part-time, the pretext of why we need a full-time legislature, because that's all they are. Okay, then we go to John Fernandez versus Every Child. And this is something that Troy ran. Hundreds of public school air cons broken as DOE prepares for opening. Now, they didn't know when school was going to open, did they? They haven't known for any longer than about a year. Troy starts out with a good line. It's hot on Guam. School starts next week. And when it does, between 400 and 500 air conditioning units throughout the public schools will not be working. The Guam Department of Education Maintenance Division is assessing how many classrooms and in which schools this affects, according to spokeswoman Michelle Francas. So now the Maintenance Division is assessing how many classrooms and in which schools this affects. They don't know. They've got to, obviously they won't know until school starts, Jose, because they won't know that they don't work until they're turned on, and they don't turn on, and there's no sense turning them on when there's no kids in the classroom. So how could they possibly know before tomorrow? More fracas. The previous contract expired. The vendor that normally would fix or replace these units, and a new vendor has been awarded the bid, but the contract still is with the department's legal division for review before it heads to the Office of the Attorney General for review. Now, of course, the Attorney General probably won't be able to do that, but what he will do is file a complaint in the Superior Court for a declaratory judgment, asking if he could go ahead and approve that contract. Beep, beep. School starts Wednesday. Candidate has asked governor's spokeswoman, Crystal Paco San Augustine, what the administration is doing to anything to assist DOE with the opening of the schools next week, and whether anything is being done to help DOE to ensure classrooms are ready and adequate for the needs of children according to the law. Now, this is what I like about this article of Troy's. The Every Child is Entitled to an Adequate Public Education Act requires that public schools provide air-conditioned, or properly ventilated classrooms in which sensible air temperature is no greater than 78 degrees. I've got the aircon at my house set at 78, and I don't run cool, but it works for me. So I'd have to say that's got to be the standard. It can't be any hotter than that. It can't be 79. It's got to be 78. Now, the term sensible temperature, in order to do that, you have to account for the breeze. You need a wet bulb and a dry bulb thermometer in order to come up with that. So as an example, if it's if it's 79 degrees and it's one of those really dry days and you've got a 15-knot wind blowing through the classroom, it's going to be okay. If it's one of these rainy season days where the overnight temperature doesn't drop below 81, you've got that gray, slate gray cloud cover hanging over the whole world relative to humidity up in the 90s, and not even a whisper of a breeze, 78 is going to be kind of warm. But it can't go any higher than 78. Another one would be, you know, sometimes we have those windy, rainy days where the temperature, especially if it was a clear night the night before, and then we have those windy, rainy days where you got about a 15-knot wind, the temperature gets down to 75 without aircon. You don't need aircon then. This reminds me of I should probably save this till I get to Judy Wampat, but it reminds me of a Judy Wampat 10 story. After I was able to get the Every Child Act passed in the 28th Guam legislature, the law has teeth, and it allows every student has standing to file suit for a violation of the act, and every parent has in effect standing to file on behalf of the student. It's something a little bit different. So every kid in an unair-conditioned classroom can file suit, and they should. So there was a certain amount of nervous Nellies, including Wampat. Oh, we can't have all this litigation, all these suits and everything. It'll cost us too much money. So she introduces a bill to establish something called an education suruhano. The bad news was he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't do anything. The good news was he was never charged with rape.
Wow.
Suruhano community, where are you out there? Just roll over for this kind of stuff. Yeah, so, you know, he was typical. They interviewed him a couple times. Well, you know, first thing I got to do is I got to get myself a vehicle, and I got to have an office. And if you read the Every Child Act, it holds every single government official in the executive branch liable for not providing an adequate education, part of which is potable water. So if for some reason the waterworks turns off the water to a school, at least in theory, the waterworks is liable to any one of those students who brings a suit, who could bring a suit for an injunction enjoining the waterworks to turn the water back on. So Dominic Gerlahi, the Education Suruhano, puts together this form, and he wants to know what school and who's nothing beyond the levels of the school, telling me they hadn't even read the act. He never entertained a single matter. He was paid pretty good money.
How long did that position last for?
A couple of years, yeah. Then finally, Wampat introduced a bill to just deal with the section I just read. That was what reminded me of it. And she wanted to change the law, so instead of a maximum temperature of 78, it should be a range of 78 to 84. Crazy. A range of 78 to
84.
84. Now, can you imagine what it would be like to be sitting in here at 84 degrees?
Did they move all the schools down south or Chigo?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's ridiculous on its face. And then I used a technique lawyers called, how is it? Argumentum ad absurdum, right? Take it to its logical extreme. So if Juan Pat's bill became law, we would not only have to put air conditioners in every room, we'd have to put what are called heat pumps in every room. And if you go to places in the temperate zone in the mainland, stay in a motel, you'll see that you can change it from heat to cool. In the wintertime, you turn it over to heat. It blows hot air into the room. In the summertime, it blows cold air. One machine does both. Does it by reversing some flows, evaporator, condenser, etc. I could explain it, but it's not worth it. Okay, let's take a short break and we'll come back to heat pumps.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
There's still time to register for fall 2022 classes at the Guam Community College. Secure your seat by logging on to guamcc.edu or drop by the campus weekdays 8 to 5 and Saturdays 8 a.m. to 12 noon. The last day to register is Friday, August 12th. Get your future started at GCC Guam Community College, providing 45 years of student success by putting students first, mission always.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So if Juan Pat's bill had become law, we'd have to go out and buy all these heat pumps, because there are times when when we would have to turn on the heat to get the temperature in the room up to 78, have to use that heat pump feature. She also had a section in there dealing with the Cirujano that allowed the Cirujano to waive sanitary requirements, like, the number of toilets in a particular school or something like that, that for good cause shown, he could waive these requirements. So I wrote a nasty letter. I said, we start out with this guy who's supposed to be a liaison between the public and the government to help bring resolution to these problems, and then we make him the guy who can turn the law off. Funniest thing, that bill never got to a public hearing. Juan Pat 10 didn't champion it at all. And we know that she can really move something if she wants to, like a great salary smash and grab.
That it was even proposed is incredible.
It really is. It really is. Yeah, so anyhow, back to the Every Child Act. The Every Child Act, it requires, among other requirements, that public schools provide air-conditioned or properly ventilated classrooms in which a sensible air temperature is no greater than 78 degrees. I started teaching here when schools were not air-conditioned. It was Doris Brooks in the 20th that enacted a statute that says you got to air-condition all the classrooms. And to me, it made an awful lot of sense. When I started teaching, we were at what is now called Kennedy High School. At the time, it was Tumum High School. John Kennedy was still alive. And not only was it hot, but you had to keep the windows open to capture such breeze as was blowing through there. There would be days when planes would be doing touch and go all day long at NAS. You could hardly hear yourself think. We did our best, but how much learning could actually occur in that? But even then, education is our top priority. We'll make sure the principal's office is air-conditioned. We'll make sure the senator's offices are air-conditioned. Classrooms, it costs a lot of money, so maybe not so much. Okay, going back to the candid article. The law, that is the Every Child is Entitled to an Adequate Public Education Act, The law was authored by former Senator Robert Bob Klitzkie in 2005, following perennial bickering between the governor's office and DOE that led to funding shortages and came at the expense of the basic needs for students and teachers. Adequate learning and teaching environments, adequate numbers of certified teachers and staff, proper sanitation and sanitary supplies for restrooms, potable drinking water, etc. The statute forced collaboration and public school budgets that at least funded the minimum requirements of the law. And for nearly 20 years, it enveloped the balance of the Camacho administration, all of the Calvo administration, and into the first 2 years of the LG administration, only pockets of compliance issues persisted. Despite about $1 million in federal discretionary funds resulting from the pandemic and extraordinary procurement powers, remember that? I have a feeling that the 19th floor, was air conditioned. You wouldn't want people who spend time in there working up a sweat, would you, Jose?
No comment.
Yeah. So, she had extraordinary procurement powers. DOE is about to enter its biggest violation of the Every Child Act since its inception. What can be done about it? According to the law, students themselves have standing to sue the governor, the superintendent, who is also the chairman of the governor's reelection campaign. That must be the interim superintendent, Francis Santos, yeah. And any other public official responsible for the violation. A public school student, here's a quote, shall have a claim and standing to sue the government and any officer of the executive branch in his official capacity for the purpose of enjoining such officer from failing to provide an adequate public education to public school students, but not for money damages. So there you are, parents. If your kids are cooking in those classrooms, you have standing to sue. Now, there is a group here that has failed as seriously as the Department of Education has, Jose, and that would be the Guam Federation of Teachers. The Guam Federation of Teachers knows how to hire lawyers, file suit, etc. Many teachers, if not most, are parents. Teachers know parents. When there's a violation, it would be relatively easy for the Guam Federation of Teachers to bring that matter before the Superior Court, get an injunction, and enjoin the violation of the act. You know how many times the Guam Federation of Teachers has done that? Not once. Not even once. And it's a terrific tool for them to use. But it's like the machete that you left at home when you went out boonie stepping. It just doesn't do you any good if you don't have it in your hands.
Now, we haven't seen any press releases from the Guam Federation of Teachers.
No.
I'm not sure. The only thing that I've seen them actively done is distribute, what's the shots that kids have to get? Not tetanus shot, I'm sorry. So I've seen
vaccinations.
Yeah, I've seen those, but what is it that they do nowadays?
Yeah.
According to what they're supposed to be doing.
According to what they're supposed to do. I don't know, maybe they're consulting with Jane Flores on that. Okay, so I hold the Guam Federation, and back in the day, when I was a member of GFT, we had something that was called or maybe the National had something called the Militancy Fund. Yeah, it was a national, and we could apply for money from the Militancy Fund to file suit and to raise hell. That's what unions do when things go off the tracks.
Besides collecting dues.
Besides collecting dues, paying their staff, paying themselves. The last time I got into this, I suspect they're still doing it. They're even paying the officers of the GFT. Yeah. Yeah, when we started out, it was a group of highly committed, very idealistic, principled people who probably would have punched you if you said you guys should get paid for doing this. No! All right, now the other person who is really, really culpable on this, actually the highest degree of culpability, is none other than John Fernandez, who obviously should have been aware of this. And you've heard me talk before about what it is that we expect managers and leaders to do. Conventional wisdom is, well, the manager finds out what the problem is, he describes the problem, and then if anybody asks him about it, he describes the problem and tells that person why the problem can't be solved. Getting himself off the hook because he told you why it can't be solved. So you can't blame him, right? No. If that's all you can do, you are not a leader, and you should get fired forthwith. Leaders' jobs, leaders do other things than sign papers, make boring speeches, stroll around the hallway. Their job is to solve problems. Now, I don't care which way it is. Either John Fernandez didn't know, or John Fernandez knew and didn't do anything. Which is worse? Probably the second is worse than the first. Okay, now I'm going to make a couple of excuses for John Fernandez, right? First excuse, he was so busy taking his victory lap at the end of his term, how could you expect him to pay any attention to what's going to happen after he's gone when the schools open on August 10th? That is so unfair, right? Second, the hagiography for John Fernandez, should he henceforth be known as St. John Fernandez? The hagiography of John Fernandez occupied so much of his time. One, and two, it would have been such a disappointment to the hagiographers had they found out that John was not preparing a Department of Education post-July 15, that it might have thrown a monkey wrench into the hagiography, which it would have been just intolerable. Because everybody had John, he lasted for 10 years. We're not going to talk about the year that he was on suspension with pay. He lasted for 10 years, and he did just such a wonderful job for us. And we really wish he could stay, but we know he has to go. And everybody, hold up your hands. Now, first, we'll have a hand for John Fernandez. Okay. Okay, now John Fernandez is leaving. Okay, everyone wring your hands. So how could we expect? And you notice even Troy kind of missed that part because it's his fault. When you're the captain of the ship, everything that happens on the ship that shouldn't happen is your fault. Everything that doesn't happen on the ship that should happen is your fault. And it's the same way when you're the director of education.
And he's not going down with the ship.
He's not going down. He jumped ship. He pulled a dugout Doug MacArthur. He jumped in a PT boat and sped off to Australia. All right, let's take a short break here, folks.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Subway's Eat Fresh Refresh brings you the sequel to the Sweet Onion Chicken Teriyaki. Enjoy the new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki. Delight your taste buds with tender, juicy steak marinated in the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce and stacked high on toasted artisan Italian bread, topped with American cheese, green peppers, red onions, and drizzled with the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce. The new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki is the height of food craveability. Give in to your cravings at Subway. Eat fresh.
Okay, so we're back here. Jose, could you put the mystery man picture back up on the screen for us? Yeah, there he is. You'll recall I'm really trying to figure out who that guy is. It's between Josh and Nancy, and behind them, the guy with a shaved head. There's an arrow pointing to him. Bonnie Suba is trying to help out. Bonnie Suba says, Gateway Pundit just confirmed that Pelosi's son was on that trip to Guam. That her husband couldn't make it because he had to go to court on his DWI. Oh, that's me. That's not Bonnie. Do a search on Pelosi visit to Guam and tour and can zoom that guy's face. Sure looks like he's her junior boy. So is the mystery man the son of Nancy Pelosi? And if he is, what's he doing there with the muckety-mucks? Are we at the bay not only to haul her around, we got to haul her kid around too? So come on out there, Tall Tales detectives. I want to know who that guy is. All right, thanks, Jose. Next item on the card, we have Dennis versus MSN. Dennis Rodriguez, also known as Dennis the Menace, versus Michael San Nicolas, who ran for governor last time around. You'll recall there were 4 Democrat candidates. There was Dennis, former Governor Carl Gutierrez, Frank Uggan, and Lou Leon Guerrero. Dennis didn't make it through the primary. After that, I don't know what happened to him, but of course he's turned up on the governor's payroll now at more than $100,000. And of course, if the folks in Lou's campaign are using the 1972 playbook, it all makes perfect sense, right? You bring in somebody else who's got a political base, you make him part of your team, and then the people in the person who you enlisted will talk to his base about voting for you. And of course, if there's identity politics involved here, Dennis Rodriguez is not Chamorro. Dennis Rodriguez is Filipino. And we know that about 30% of the electorate, close to 30, is Filipino, almost as many as Chamorros. So if you could capture the Filipino vote, and then, of course, Lou's got the Chamorro vote locked up. You know why? I was born here, Ray. You weren't. Yeah.
This is my island.
This is my island, yeah.
Except for you voters that are Filipino.
Yeah. So she signed up Dennis. A little bit of a disappointment. You know, Dennis was pretty strong anti-abortion.
Very, very strong.
Very strong anti-abortion. And he had that committee, and he did stuff with it, and
this is perplexing for me too, Bob. I know I spoke to you about it a little bit before the show, and I don't know how to address this because it almost seems like something's being left out the door for the sake of campaigning. And I don't like this I don't like the season when it ends up like this, but this is where I feel like I don't know what to say. It really is disappointing.
One of the things that politicians want you to believe about them is that they are men of principle, that they have standards and principles, many, if not most of which are inviolable. So it's kind of hard if you campaign hammer and tongs against someone, and then when that person wins, you sign up on that person's team. I don't think Dennis went after Lou like that.
No, he didn't, and that's part of his character.
Yeah.
But however, I do know that his character has a lot to do with his faith, or his faith has a lot to do with his character.
Okay.
And that's where my questioning is: at what point do you leave that behind?
Yeah. So when you've been anti-abortion, when your committee has been earmarked as anti-abortion, when the anti-abortion folks saw you as an ally, and then all of a sudden you sign up with the most extreme abortionist we've ever seen on this island, and abortionist who comes out publicly in favor of infanticide. And all of a sudden, Dennis takes off his Dennis shirt and puts on his blue shirt.
If he decides to run again in any capacity, I don't think he can use this as a platform, a pro-life position. It's going to be very hard to explain this.
Well, you know who's going to call him out on that one, don't you?
Hello.
And me.
You, yep.
Yeah. Now, I can't resist being a little snarky here, Jose. So Dennis has got himself, not a golden parachute, he's got himself one of those golden rockets, right? One of those golden spaceship rockets to propel him into a higher atmosphere of more money. But I got to wonder, what about David Cruz?
Ooh.
Where's Dave Cruz? Are we going to make a spot for Dave Cruz? Maybe an unclassified position so he can go out and campaign for Lou? I think we've all seen that movie before. Okay, next item on the card is Tall Tales versus Lieutenant Governor and Roy Gamboa. I'm getting pretty close to the halftime show. Let me just cruise through Facebook here and see what's going on, so I can start afresh with the card. I've got Brennan Fausto and Juanita Machi. Good to see you back. And Lonnie Salas, Bonnie's here. Ken Brown all the way from California, and Menno Franklin is here. Nos Santos, whoever that is, Nos Santos. And Colin Clark. And Colin, your T-shirt should be in the mail right now. I've ordered them up. We've got Bonnie Suba, who says instead of gun violence, put the criminal in jail, prosecute them and flag them as gun violence persons so they can't pass a background check and thereafter won't get a gun. Yeah, well, I'm gonna pick this up right after the show, and then we'll go to Hope screen tests. Okay, let's break for the halftime show, gang.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A step closer to the finish line. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News. After numerous amendments were rejected during the vote-a-rama, the U.S. Senate passed the Inflation Reduction Act Sunday. Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says the legislation will have a positive impact on inflation.
We've really focused on reducing costs, and I think the American people will begin to see it.
Republicans say the bill will be disastrous for the economy. Here's Republican Representative Mike Turner of Ohio.
The problem is you can't spend your way out of inflation, and you certainly can't tax your way out of a recession.
Congressman Turner says the bill should focus more on fossil fuels and less on climate change. The spending bill sets aside hundreds of billions of dollars for climate change initiatives. Before reaching the president's desk, it needs to next pass the House. Another busload of migrants seeking asylum drove into New York City Sunday. Fox's Nate Foy has more.
Mayor Adams says the city will step up and take care of these migrants, but he also says more help is needed from the Biden administration. And of course, Texas has also been busing migrants to Washington, D.C. for months. Governor Abbott says 6,500 have arrived there just since April, and it's all part of his plan to force the Biden administration to acknowledge the crisis at the border.
A ceasefire between Israel and Iran-backed Palestinian militants, which was mediated by Egyptian officials, went into effect Sunday night. Fox's Trey Yingst has more from Ashkelon, Israel.
This after 3 days of fighting between the two sides. Earlier, we saw Islamic Jihad firing rockets into major population centers here, including the cities of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. The Israelis responding with airstrikes along the Gaza Strip, killing more than 40 Palestinians, most of them militants from the group Islamic Jihad.
America is listening to Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The Biden administration planning to fix border wall gaps along the southern border. Fox's Bill Malugin has the latest on illegal border crossings in Eagle Pass, Texas.
In Douglas, Arizona, part of the Tucson Sector Border Patrol, agents there capturing Mexican national named Saul Garcia Ibarra. He's got a previous conviction on his record for first-degree rape in Salt Lake City, Utah. Also in Arizona, a massive fentanyl bust made by CBP agents at the Nogales, Arizona port of entry. They stopped a vehicle that had more than 390,000 fentanyl pills, also 10 pounds of meth.
Actress Anne Heche now in stable condition following a recent car crash near Los Angeles. Fox's Charles Watson has the details.
We spoke to Lynn Michelle. She had been having a normal day moments before a series of incidents that saw Heche first drive her blue Mini Cooper into the garage of an apartment complex and then into Michelle's home in LA's Mar Vista neighborhood. Heche's car went right through the exterior, destroying the roof and everything in its path before catching fire while Heche was still inside. Michelle, who was home at the time, was understandably confused after hearing the loud impact and coming out to see all of her belongings destroyed.
A French scientist apologizing for an online snafu.
Etienne Klein is saying sorry after the world-renowned physicist tweeted a photo he claimed was from NASA's James Webb Telescope showing Proxima Centauri, the closest star to the sun. Klein tweeting, "This level of detail, a new world is unveiled every day," with a pic of a deep red disk with swirling white colors set against a black background. But it turns out that wasn't an astronomical wonder. It was a slice of chorizo, a type of spicy sausage from Spain. Klein apologizing, telling a French news outlet his intention was to raise awareness about fake news online.
That's Fox's Matt Napolitano. I'm Laura Cantor, and this is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Parents, take advantage of FHP Health Center's Back to School Early Bird Special. Before summer gets too busy, make an appointment now to update your child's immunizations, PPD skin tests, and sports physicals. Call FHP Pediatrics. Most insurance plans accepted, including TRICARE, Medicaid, and self-pay patients. Call for an appointment. 671-646-5825. Press 1. Go to FHPGuam.com for more information. FHP, our island, your clinic.
Okay, here we are, back again. Tall Tales. Right after that big halftime show, we're going to go to Hope Cristobal's screen test in a minute, but I want to read Eddie Cruz's comment on Facebook dealing with firearms. And this is what he said: leave law-abiding gun owners alone. Make an effort to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Incarcerate criminals to teach them a lesson and not allow them to be taught how to become better criminals. Fight for tougher sentences, but allow the parole board to reduce incarcerations on good behavior and accomplishment of rehab programs. Well, I'm not going to talk about the sentences part, but I do want to talk about leave gun owners alone. We have an extremely strict firearms law here, and you know who the firearms community consists of?
The police chief? Chief of police?
Nobody.
Oh, nobody.
Nobody. I don't know anybody who is out there talking about the laws, about guns, about the Second Amendment, except me, and all these important things. So, and I know that there are a lot of folks on the island that own guns that are not too crazy about the situation, but until people stand up and start talking, it's not going to change. And somebody's going to get busted on one of these tough gun laws, because as I read the news, more and more people are buying guns, people who probably never thought about buying guns before, because our society's coming apart. And a lot of people think that, you know, as society comes apart, I can't depend on the cops, especially in these defund the police cities. I got to be able to defend myself. So it'd be really nice if we had a gun group, you know, a pro-gun group set up here, do some lobbying, talk to senators, call the talk shows, do whatever you need. Just don't, you know, when you're having rallies, don't be firing your guns into the air to attract attention to yourself.
Only on New Year's.
Yeah.
But right. You know, the thing is, the big roadblock you'd have to go over is the people, the constant propaganda and the poisoning of the Second Amendment that comes from the media.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why they're ahead, you know, by default, because no one is out there fighting with them, trying to, except for the National Rifle Association and the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association and gangs like this. And unfortunately, the NRA has got so many internal problems right now that they've lost a lot of their effectiveness. Okay, it's the first day of the week. You'll notice I am wearing my, what color is that shirt? I am wearing my red shirt today because it's red shirt. I wouldn't even think about wearing an orange shirt on Monday. It's Red Shirt Monday. That means it's time for Hope Cristobal's screen test. Roll it, Jose.
Colonizer! You're nothing but a white colonizer. That's who you are. Colonization is the same thing as slow murder. You're a murderer. That's who you are. Get off my island!
Sir, you need to go. You can't be policing people here and telling people how to protest and what to protest for. You need to go. You need to go. I'm against this. That's cool, but you cannot be policing people and telling them how to protest and what to advocate for. She has a right to go.
I'm an indigenous tomorrow. I have more rights here than you are. You came here because of the structures of colonialism, asshole. You need to leave.
You need to go.
Please.
You need to get out of here.
Please pause this.
Get out of here.
Please, this is not your place.
When I get a chance, go.
Please. Thank you. Thank you, pause this. Please leave. Oh, you think
What happened, man?
Oh, he confronted me.
What did he say?
He's telling me I shouldn't be here. I support Black Lives Matter. It's part of the colonialistic systemic racism. And I came here to support these people. He's a white man that has come here. And he continues the legacy of colonialism. He continues to fight people, individuals, my goodness. I'm a former senator. I authored the Commission on Decolonization. Karohu. Hi, Mama.
We are proud of you, Auntie.
Si Diyos mangasi.
So there you go. We'll run it again next Monday. I think it's really important that I keep running this for, in case anyone hasn't seen it. And you hear me talking about the separatists on our island, those who would like to see Guam separate from the United States and become an independent country. She is the voice and face of separatism. She's completely in character. You know, he's a white man. He needs to leave. She has more rights than he does. You can imagine what the public's, the independent Socialist Republic of Guahan would be like with the likes of Hope Cristobal in charge. I'm going to try this. I don't understand how she can talk with her teeth clenched so tightly together. You need to leave. He's nothing but a white man who come here because of the structure of colonialism.
You're assuming she's speaking from that orifice.
Yeah. And I always mention this, that there's more to the story than this, because the Post ran a really nice puff piece about Hope Cristobal. It looks like this. Yeah, there she is in a 15-year-old picture. And it says, Hope Cristobal, first and foremost a nurturer. And there's one part of the article that's pretty interesting. As an activist, Cristobal is not afraid of confrontation. Quote, at the Black Lives Matter rally in Hagatna last year, there were counter-protesters harassing us. That's what you just watched, the counter-protesters harassing her. I wasn't afraid. There are always people out there who will challenge you. Please, these are just a part of the journey. I can be hard because I'm an educator. I went to the Black Lives Rally Matter because I wanted to show my support for oppressed people. Well, you could have shown support for the guy you were oppressing. I follow the news and I'm aware that innocent people are getting killed just because of their skin color. You're a white man. You have no rights here. Jeez. You know, it's amazing with these ideologues that you give them half a chance and they whip out their tongue and cut their throat with it. And that's classic Hope. Yeah. And then she says, we need to see each other beyond the color of our skin. Yeah.
It's like if you wanted to have a clinic on projectionism, that was it right there.
There it is right there.
But I think it's deeper than that, Bob. You know, they did support Black Lives Matter, and none of them got any timeshare units for those mansions that were purchased with their money.
Yeah, but they're still loyal. Yeah, they're not easily dissuaded, right? Yeah. Okay, so much for Hope and the Hope Cristobal screen test. I keep wondering if we sent this off to every studio in Hollywood, if they would have a spot for her, if they would be able to hire her. Jose, did you run the T-shirt ad during the halftime show?
This one?
Yeah.
Well, we can do it during the seventh inning stretch.
We'll do it during the seventh inning stretch. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the card. Next item on the card is Lieutenant Governor, as you were, Tall Tales versus Lieutenant Governor and Roy Gamboa. This is a story that ran on Saturday in the Daily News, front page above the fold.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I guess they decided to do some real journalism and even take on the governor there. It was nice. And I was especially happy because the reporter assigned was Steve Lemtianko, was one of the best. Here's what the article says. Guam law prohibits most government of Guam employees from keeping their jobs while running for elected office. But the Guam State Clearinghouse, which is run by the lieutenant governor, continued to employ program coordinator Roy Gamboa for weeks after he filed his paperwork to run for the legislature. Gamboa is a Democrat candidate for senator in the August 27 primary election. Although Gamboa submitted a letter of resignation on June 28 when he filed his candidacy with the Election Commission, the clearinghouse administrator asked him to continue to work, and Gamboa stayed on the job. The clearinghouse continued to employ Gamboa until July 6, as there were 16, several days after former Republican Senator Bob Klitzkie, who is now a radio host, I didn't even mention the name of the show, sent the governor's office an email asking for information about Gamboa's continued employment. Klitzkie later filed a report with the Civil Service Commission asking for an investigation. Guam law restricts political activity by employees of the executive branch, the judiciary, and autonomous and semi-autonomous agencies. The restrictions do not apply to legislative employees. The law is known as the Mini-Hatch Act. Being a candidate is one type of prohibited activities. Gamboa didn't respond to an email and a phone message asking for comment. Quote, "We are the ones who asked Gamboa to do a transition for 2 weeks to transition the programs he was working on," Clearinghouse Administrator Stephanie Flores said Friday. That makes it okay, right? I mean, she works for the lieutenant governor who's running for re-election. It's okay. Lieutenant Governor Joshua Tenorio has oversight for the clearinghouse and serves as the director for the office, which reviews proposed programs and projects to ensure they are consistent with and don't duplicate existing government programs. Among other things, the clearinghouse reviews federal grant applications by GovGuam agencies. Guam law states, when any person has reason to believe a government employee has violated the Mini-Hatch Act, he may report the matter to the Civil Service Commission, which can investigate. Klitzkie in July asked the Lieutenant Governor's office to provide copies of any reports it submitted to the Civil Service Commission related to Gamboa's candidacy and employment. The governor's office on July 15 told Klitzkie it didn't have any reports. Gamboa left the clearinghouse the next day. Right after he got caught, he decided it's time to start obeying the law. And Klitzkie on July 18 asked the Civil Service Commission to investigate, stating the Lieutenant Governor's office has taken no action on Gamboa's violation of the law. Well, that isn't exactly correct. They did take some action on Gamboa's violation of the law. They condoned it. Roy Gamboa, as a government employee, has embarked on an impermissible campaign for senator, Klitzkie told the commission. The commission on July 28 decided to investigate after agreeing that Gamboa is subject to the restrictions of the Mini-Hatch Act. The Civil Service Commission is scheduled to meet on 9 a.m. August 16 to hear the commission's staff assessment of the alleged Mini-Hatch Act violation. The commission has the authority to remove employees who violate restrictions on political activity. Now, that's the news, but of course we all know that the Civil Service Commission is the Western Pacific distributor of whitewash. So when it gets for that staff assessment, they'll take it in the back room and break open a 5-gallon can of whitewash. and completely whitewash it. And I'm just imagining what they're going to say. We can't blame Mr. Gamboa because he was asked to stay on to provide an orderly transmission, so he did a good thing there. So he didn't do anything wrong. We can't blame Stephanie Flores because she's an unclassified employee. We can't blame the lieutenant governor because he's got the ironclad Civil Service Commission defense he didn't know. Therefore, so, you know, if Gamboa, they'll drag this on so that if Gamboa wins, he's sworn in, and he doesn't have to worry about because the Civil Service Commission can't touch him, and he will have skated away for nothing. There ought to be serious criticism of the lieutenant governor on this. Serious. This is what editorials are about.
You would think. I mean, this is exactly how not to have a character trait as a senator. Someone telling you it's okay to buck the rules,
yeah,
and then going along with it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about something that happened in the past.
Yeah.
We're not talking about something that happened in his childhood or adolescence. This just happened as if it was yesterday.
After he'd filed as the candidate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to not know when we've been talking about these types of things for a long time.
Yeah.
Especially the lieutenant governor's office.
Well, and then of course it is an expectation that people who run for senator kind of know something, you know. Yeah. So this is editorial material. The Daily News ought to dump hard on Gamboa. It ought to dump hard on Stephanie Flores, and it ought to dump hard on the lieutenant governor. You think they will, Jose?
I don't know, but I like to ask the question, is this how his office is going to be handled if he is elected? If someone asks him to look the other way, he's going to look the other way?
If it means he can keep drawing his paycheck.
Exactly.
He's got standards. He's got a family to take care of, Jose.
We used to require standards.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyhow, when I saw it, when I became aware of it, I think that, you know, it's the kind of thing that I do, but it's the kind of thing that we all should do. Because we can't depend on one part of the government to keep another part of the government on course. It's the job of the citizen to hold the government to the standards that it's supposed to be meeting up to.
Now, a lot of people are going to ask these questions. Why the Mini Hatch Act? Why do we have to tell people they can't remain in these positions if they're running for a position, a political position?
It comes back to my back scratcher analogy that I hold that government officials should not use the government's back scratcher to scratch their own back. So people who are government employees have the ability on their jobs to benefit or detract from the candidacy of somebody. Or are you talking about being a candidate? Yeah, being a candidate. Yeah, if you're going to be a candidate, you can't be on the government payroll because then we've got the administration subsidizing candidates. And that doesn't fly. Now, there are jurisdictions where you find teachers in state legislatures. And people occasionally bring that up to me. Well, can't teachers do it? And the answer is no. And the reason is this, that in the mainland and almost all of the states, not Hawaii, but certainly most of the states, school districts are municipal corporations. They are fictive legal persons. They are not part of the state government. They are regulated by state laws, just like everything else. So if you work for a school district, you're not working for the state. You're working for the district. Now, you can't be working for the school district and run for the school board, obviously, but you can run for the state legislature, and that would be all right. But we can't have the government subsidizing candidacies, and that is the evil. When people like this are able to do it, what about the poor fish who's working out there in the public sector, and it's literally costing him money to run a campaign? He's taking away from his own business, his own time to run his campaign to allow someone who's drawing a government paycheck to do it, even if he doesn't do any of it on government time. It would not be a fair system. So, you know, I hope that the Civil Service Commission does the right thing, but the real remedy here is for the newspapers to write scathing editorials about this. This is really depressing to see that the numbers, the Segundo Magatlahi, you know, is encouraging, abetting, or ignoring illegal activity through his subaltern, Stephanie Flores. And then someone turns in his papers to be a senator, and at the very same time says, yeah, but I'm going to disobey the law now that I'm a senator. It just leaves an extremely bad taste in my mouth. I've got Pacific Island Times versus the Earned Income Tax Credit next, but let's go to Wrigley Field. Jose is going to run the T-shirt ad during the time at Wrigley.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, world's most beautiful ballpark, and we just ran the Tailgater T-shirt ad on the screen there. I'm working out the details. I should be in a position where I could tell you how you could buy a Tailgater T-shirt this week. I'm hoping everything's working out right. I know that everyone is going to want to buy one or two or three, probably for Christmas, for off-island relatives, etc. But I got to give you the bad news. Can you put it up there one more time, Jose? I got to give you the bad news. We'll sell you the T-shirt, but we can't furnish the beard. I was in some serious negotiations with Jose, but they fell apart. So you got to furnish your own beard. But we're probably going to be able to get you the T-shirt. Thank you, Jose. All right, next item on the card is Pacific Island Times versus the Earned Income Tax Credit. Guam has received $56.1 million in Earned Income Tax Credit reimbursement from the Treasury following the federal approval of the Department of Revenue and Taxation's EITC implementation plan of 2021. For years, previous administrations tried to fund this federal mandate. People love to throw that around, federal mandate. Pacific Island Times, the EITC cash out is not a federal mandate. So tie a string around your brain there. I'll explain that later on. It is not a federal mandate. After relentless efforts in working with the White House officials and Congress, we have succeeded, Governor Leon Guerrero said. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 provides that Guam would get a 100% cost reimbursement from the federal government for EITC obligations to the government beginning in 2021 and for all following tax years. And there's a subheading in the article, Congress has now authorized funds for all U.S. jurisdictions. I don't know what that means. If they're talking about all the territories, I know what it means. If they're talking about the states, it makes no sense whatsoever. Going on, but that's only the beginning of the work. Local workers have to do all the hard work in creating programs, understanding federal guidelines, and actually distributing funds. No. It's a reimbursement, Governor. It's a reimbursement. He already paid out the money. The money just goes into the Treasury. We are deeply humbled to see Guam realize the receipt of these EITC revenues as a result of the actual law passed in Congress, and quietly proud to have been able to work on this for our island people, said Congressman Michael San Nicolas. We are highly satisfied that our efforts to ensure federally that these monies first go to the payment of tax refunds for our people was upheld by the U.S. Treasury, preventing politician agendas from getting in the way of us finally bringing to a close the sad history of tax refund delays that began 20 years ago. It's longer ago than that, Mike. It's been a long, long time. It's a firm commitment to delivering actual outcomes for our people and an unwavering discipline to prevent repeating mistakes of the past that must define our expectations. Yeah. He must have had Kamala Harris help him with that one. But the governor's statement, it's only the beginning of the work. The local workers have to do all the hard work in creating programs, understanding federal guidelines, and actually distributing the funds. No. Okay, now I told you that the EITC is not a federal mandate. And I've got to do a little explanation here about what EITC means, Earned Income Tax Credit. Now, if you are entitled to a tax credit, this would be a sum of a dollar figure that would be applied to your tax liability. So let's say taxpayer A is entitled to a $1,000 tax credit, and his tax liability is $10,000. He applies the $1,000 credit to the $10,000 liability, reducing his liability to $9,000. That's a tax credit. Completely different from a tax deduction. A tax deduction, let's say that same taxpayer had a gross income of $15,000. Well, he has deductions that apply to that $15,000 that take his taxable income down. So let's say he has a deduction of $1,000. He applies that to the $15,000. That reduces his tax liability to $14,000. So a credit is great. A deduction, not so bad. So tax credits will take your tax liability down to zero. Obviously, you can't credit something that you can't apply a credit to a non-existent figure, with one exception, and that's the Earned Income Tax Credit. There are some taxpayers with income at a certain level, with large enough families, where the tax credit is larger than the tax liability. So let's take an example that a taxpayer has a tax liability of $1,000. He owes the government $1,000. But when he goes through the works through the EITC, he has a credit of $1,000. Excuse me. He has a credit of $1,500. First $1,000 of that credit goes against his liability, takes him down to zero. The next $500 is a check written out to him. That's why I call it EITC cash out, to distinguish the money that is paid to the taxpayer from the pure credit. Most people don't want to think about that, but that's the way it works. So the Gutierrez government, under the leadership of Joey
Duenas?
Yeah, Joey Duenas, who was the director of Rev Tax at that time, with the extremely able assistance of counsel for Rev Tax at that time, whose name will pop in my head in just a second, decided that when you're dealing with the cash out, there's no obligation on the part of the government to pay it. Because a careful reading of the Organic Act says that the revenue laws effect in the United States shall likewise be effect in Guam. Revenue laws are laws that cause revenue to come in. When you're talking about paying money out, Steve Cohen, a great lawyer, is no longer here. So when you're paying money out, that's not a revenue law anymore. That's a social welfare program. And the Organic Act doesn't say that the revenue laws and social welfare programs in this. No, it doesn't say that. So Joey came out with a revenue ruling 93-001, saying what I just got done saying we don't owe no stinking earned income tax credit. So what happened after that? This got into a legislature versus Governor Gutierrez. So the legislature passes Public Law 24-61. It's short. I'll read it. First section. For the purposes of this chapter, those definitions in the Internal Revenue Code applicable to the Earned Income Tax Credit are applicable to this chapter to implement the Guam Earned Income Program contained in this chapter. Next section. For fiscal year 1998 and each year thereafter, the Department of Rev Tax is authorized to institute an earned income program to mirror the program instituted by the federal government known as the Earned Income Tax Credit. Next section. The federal Earned Income Tax Credit is a subsidy authorized in the states and offered to lower income workers as an incentive to better their economic conditions, enables them to remain within the workforce. The Guam Earned Income Program shall be instituted using the same income levels as used in the federal law to compute a subsidy which will be paid to residents of Guam who filed earned income tax returns to the Department of Rev Tax. Last section. For fiscal year 1998 and each year thereafter, the Department of Rev Tax is authorized on a continuing basis to spend funds from the provisions of refunds, etc. So that's it. The only reason that we're paying the Earned Income Tax Credit now is not a federal mandate, Pacific Island Times. But everybody knows, because you keep hearing it all the times. Everybody knows that the insular cases are racist, right? Everybody knows. So that's the only reason that we were paying the Earned Income Tax Credit. I have a feeling that somebody back at the Treasury Department doesn't know about this, because if he did, he'd say, we're reimbursing the folks in Guam for a tax that they've enacted upon themselves. I don't think so. So it's good they're reimbursing us for us, but yeah. So once again, I heard that over, federal government keeps imposing these federal mandates on us like earned income tax credits. Just not so. Let me see what I got here. I got somebody in the green room. It's Frenchie, Hope versus Paul Z. Okay, well, Frenchie, I think, just got back to the island, so maybe he's a little bit slower than normal, but we finished this item on the card, so we'll go back to the Hope Cristobal screen test. I'm sure Frenchie has some really interesting things to tell us about Hope versus Paul Zerzan. Go ahead, Frenchie. Welcome home.
Well, thank you. I landed on the rock. So, yeah, it's interesting because Paul and I are connected on LinkedIn, which is social media for professional people. And he recently commented on Neil Weir's website, which was pushing for that same old tire story about the acts being very racist and therefore it needed to be overturned. And he basically debunked it. And it was interesting to see that he's fighting on so many different levels. I didn't expect it to see him on LinkedIn posting things like this, but he was right on target, and I gave him thumbs up on that one. And then several weeks back, I was in a tiny little city in the middle of the Pyrenees called Andorra, and I was with some Spanish friends, and we were listening to tall tales, and they were laughing. They kind of liked your banter, and you put on Hope Cristobal, and they were all, their jaw dropped and said, "Who is this racist woman?" And so I tried to explain who she was and everything, and among us was also a good friend from Tahiti who has been fighting the separatists over there for many years. And he said, well, it's the same type of disinformation, half-truths, and jumping the gun on things that are not right. And basically, those people are the real racists. They are the ones that basically wants you to go back to tribalism. And we all know that tribalism was the main cause of many centuries of conflict. And this is what those people are doing. They want us to go back to tribalism, put us in little boxes where you are either with us or against us, and basically that's what they're doing. So very interesting, and I'm glad I'm back on home, and it was not too bad. It was actually, Guam is cooler right now than Europe. We were in the 105 degrees, but no humidity, unlike Guam. So that was my little catch on this, and I hope Posers and keeps on fighting on this thing, just like you do, and other goodwill people are doing.
Well, thanks a lot for calling, Frenchie. You know that I think that Andorra is a very special place. If you've never been to Andorra, everyone should put it on his bucket list. It's an extremely interesting place, and to know that there are tailgaters in Andorra, just you can't imagine my happiness. And I always talk about our international radio listening audience, but you can't get more international than Andorra.
Yeah, it is. And you know, the independent people should visit Andorra, because this is a small, successful nation, but they are not using tribalism, they are not using Marxism, they are using common sense economics, and they are a very wealthy nation, and they are able to welcome tens of thousands of people from the outside that integrate very well in their society. So they have something that the pro-independence movement could learn from, instead of pushing those Marxist tribal approach that Hope Cristobal and the Che Bevacqua and all those people are pushing in a very hypocritical way. So, yeah.
Okay, well, good to have you home again, Frenchie.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be home.
See you later. Yeah, that's our Frenchie. Okay, well, the rotation of the world is back in sync. Frenchie's on Guam. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking services, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. That means I got about 6 furlongs more, and I'll be crossing the finish line, finishing another exciting episode of Tall Tales. Next item on the card is CNMI versus Keneal Weird. And this is a story that ran in the Daily News. The headline, CNMI Indigenous Groups Back Controversial Insular Cases. Once again, now this is the second time I've seen a news story that actually gets the insular cases right instead of going along on the everybody knows Neil Weird propaganda. And here's how it goes. Land ownership restrictions in the CNMI are important to preserve cultural ties to the land, said Northern Mariana's indigenous rights activist John Gonzalez. We don't want to end up like Guam. We don't want to end up like Hawaii, where the indigenous cultural landowners are now the minority because the majority of property has been siphoned by the United States, siphoned by foreigners. Gonzalez, who works as a policy analyst for the CNMI government, is a board member of the indigenous rights organization, quote, Northern Mariana's Descent Corporation, which 3 weeks ago asked the U.S. Supreme Court to hold the controversial insular cases. And now here we go with the propaganda. The controversial insular cases dash race-based Supreme Court opinions. The Daily News is just printing that because everybody knows, right? Which describe the territories as home to alien races. It's wrong. Just dead wrong. Couldn't be more wronger. And it just picks up Ann Paris Hattori's lie that she took to national television. And then the next subheading, equal rights denied. Opponents of the insular cases, which were decided in the early 1900s, argue the cases have been used in courts to deny equal rights to U.S. citizens in the territories and should be overruled. But the Northern Marianas Descent Corporation and the United Carolinians Association, in their July 13 brief to the Supreme Court, argue that the insular cases are important to protecting indigenous land in the Northern Marianas by allowing federal law to work differently in the territories. And how many times have I been saying this, right? And I finally see it in print. Their brief was filed in connection with a 2018 lawsuit by Utah resident John Fatisimanu, who was born in American Samoa. He sued to be recognized as a U.S. citizen, citing the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Unlike residents of the U.S. territories, other U.S. territories, those born in American Samoa are considered U.S. nationals instead of U.S. citizens because Congress never authorized birthright citizenship for American Samoa. At least they didn't use the word denied, right?
But now for the rest of the story.
Yeah. The American Samoa government opposes birthright U.S. citizenship, citing concerns related to cultural preservation and self-determination. Wow.
That's interesting.
That's how you win every argument, cultural preservation and self-determination.
But I thought getting rid of the insular cases was about self-determination.
That's what a lot of people will tell you. Could they possibly be wrong? Wow. Fetissimano won his case in the Utah District Court. It's actually the Federal District Court, but lost in the 10th Circuit, which in June 2021 ruled it is up to Congress to decide whether to grant birthright citizenship to American Samoa. Fetissimano in April petitioned the Supreme Court to hear his case. If justices grant the petition later this year, the court could decide whether the U.S. Constitution and federal laws should be fully applied to the territories, or if Congress continue to make exceptions and exemptions for the territories. Justice Neil Gorsuch earlier this year stated he's looking for an opportunity for the court to overrule the insular cases, which he said rest on a rotten foundation. The indigenous groups asked the court to reject Fetissimano's petition or to leave the insular cases untouched if they decide to grant the petition. So what they're saying is, okay, if they want to be American citizens and you want to do it, fine. Don't touch the insular cases. Now, I don't know how they could do it without touching the insular cases, but they could. But yeah, they could because they've done it here. So, of course, the real story here is that nobody in American Samoa wants this. I've had Amata Radowagan on the show for 25 minutes telling our international radio listening audience all the way to Andorra why they don't want it. They have something in Samoa called Fa'a Samoa, which means the Samoan way. They don't hold land like we hold. They don't, everybody doesn't have fee simple title to Blackacre. Blackacre and all real property is held in common by clans. And who gets to use the land, how it's used, all that sort of thing is decided by the clan and the governance of the clan. The upper house of their legislature is either made up of chiefs, hereditary chiefs, or chosen by hereditary chiefs. Those things wouldn't go. Those things only can go because of the insular cases, because Congress allows it. So they don't want any part of overruling the insular cases. They don't want to be American citizens. And I have identified all three of the Samoans who want to be American citizens, birthright American citizens. All three of them live in Utah. None of them live in Samoa. I suppose that this is going to really aggravate Neil Weir because they went through this whole thing and they didn't mention his name once. Which, of course, is the point here. How else can I get my name in the paper, except by giving something to Samoa that they definitely don't want? The indigenous group asked, going back to the Northern Marianas, the indigenous group, as you were, the Commonwealth's Covenant, which was negotiated with the United States in the 70s, allows the Commonwealth to govern itself differently than the rest of the nation, including placing legal restrictions on land ownership. The U.S. recognizes that the Northern Marianas are specks on Mother Earth. We don't have the abundance of land space that they have, Gonzalez said. Only people of Northern Marianas descent and their descendants are allowed to own land in the CNMI. That means anyone who is not of Northern Marianas descent who wants to use land in the CNMI must lease it for a maximum of 55 years from a landowner of Northern Marianas descent. The legal definition of people of Northern Marianas descent includes anyone in the Northern Marianas as of December 1950 and their descendant. Well, you had to have been born there, too. You couldn't have just caught a plane up there from Guam and said, well, here I am, CNMI descent. The definition is a political definition, Gonzalez said. It's not race-based, just because it defines Chamorros and Carolinians. But even if it is, it's still going to pass constitutional muster because of Downs. According to the brief submitted by the CNMI indigenous groups, overruling the insular cases would endanger key covenant provisions on which the CNMI's existence rests. So for them, it's an existential crisis. In particular, it would endanger the land alienation restriction, which enables the people of the Northern Marianas to retain the ownership of their most precious asset, their land. The brief states overruling the insular cases also would endanger CNMI's laws relating to jury trials, which allow all islands to have equal representation in the CNMI legislature, regardless of population. So Rhoda's got 3 senators, Tinian's got 3 senators, Saipan and the Northern Islands got 3 senators. Saipan, the Northern Island, is probably 10 or 12 times more people than the other 2 combined. Because of the covenant, people in the Commonwealth accused of crimes do not have the right to a jury trial. That's contrary to the 6th Amendment, which guarantees the right to speedy public trial. CNMI law currently allows a jury trial before a panel of 6 jurors only in criminal cases involving offensives, punishable by 5 years or more in prison or involving fines of more than $2,000.
Calling somebody a very, very disparaging name. That's an offensive.
That's an offensive, yeah. Gonzalez said the exemption from 6th Amendment is important because the CNMI's small population, which poses challenges in finding an impartial jury. How can our cousin and our uncle be impartial to us? So they didn't want. It's that time again. I'll come back to this tomorrow, but right now I got to say goodbye to our president. Let's go, Brandon!
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Opposing views. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News. The U.S. Senate passed the Inflation Reduction Act on Sunday. The $740 billion package includes measures on climate change initiatives, tax increases for large corporations, and lowering prescription drug costs. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says the Medicare provisions will be beneficial for seniors.
The Inflation Reduction Act is going to lower prescription drug costs for seniors, and that's been ever since I got here. In the Senate in 1999, we've been trying to do this, and finally we have.
Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida gives his take on the Medicare provisions.
Right now, this bill actually ought to be called the War on Seniors Act. I mean, this is a war on Medicare. This is a $280 billion cut in Medicare.
Senator Rick Scott on CBS's Face the Nation. The bill still needs to pass the House before heading to the president. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who has been critical of the Biden administration's border policies, has been sending buses carrying migrant asylum seekers to Washington, D.C. and New York City. Democratic Mayor Eric Adams of New York City says he needs the federal government's help in handling the influx of migrants.
We're reaching out to the federal government to tell them that we need help. We will be on the phone with the White House. They are willing to speak with us and communicate so that we can resolve with this real humanitarian issue and crisis that we are facing.
After testing negative for COVID for the second straight day, President Biden scheduled to visit Kentucky on Monday to survey flood damage. Fox's Jill Nato has the details.
President Biden and the First Lady will be meeting with Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear to look over the devastation from historic flooding that's hit several counties in eastern Kentucky.
America is listening to Fox News.